You ever feel like nothing good was ever gonna happen to you?
It's November 23rd, 2015, and League of Legends fans everywhere are transfixed on the city of San Jose, California. There, an international tournament is underway, the Intel Extreme Masters, where something incredible is about to happen. Semifinals are moments away from starting, as North American team Counterlogic Gaming are stepping onto the stage. CLG are the last NA roster in this event, quickly making them fan favorites for the largely American crowd. Many hope to see them get through this series and reach grand finals, but to do so they'll have to go through their toughest challenge yet, as this next best of 3 is against a Korean team. This is significant because up until now, no North American squad in the history of modern League of Legends has ever beaten a Korean roster in a multi-game series. Every time these regions have faced off, it's the same story. Some sets are close while others are sweeps, but regardless, Korea always advances. CLG were quite literally historic underdogs going into this series. But that's what's made it so surprising. 50 minutes into Game 1, this match is dead even.
Here he goes. Here comes Kuzan teleporting in from behind. Has home guards. Jin Air's going to go for it. Home guard Lysandra trying to engage here. Can he find a place? Who he pushes it back. They're going to catch the Azir. They're going to kill him as well. Arrow comes out. Pilot going to cleanse out of it. Meanwhile, Darshan going to push. They're going to go into the base. Win. That's right. Darshan's going for the win while the fight is happening here. Jin Air distracted. Will the fight even matter? Smithy comes back in. They're actually going to win the fight as well. And Darshan stopped by Wing. He's going to get the Nexus turrets anyway. Recalls coming in from Jin Air. Can Darshan do it? He's chopping away at the Nexus. Half health. Oh, they stop him. Oh, Darshan cleanses away. Can he get it? Oh, he got it. He got the Nexus. CLG takes Game 1.
CLG rode this wave of momentum into Game 2, and in spite of their opponent's best efforts, they would take the set, capturing NA's first ever series victory against Korea. Afterward, they were welcomed off stage as the heroes who finally threw off an entire continent's greatest albatross. It was a beautiful moment for one of these regions, but in these kinds of situations it can be easy to forget every winner needs a loser to beat, and for the team opposite stage today, this was just one of many in a long line of disappointments. If you're a fan of League Esports, you probably remember the Jin Air Green Wings and their unique ability to make history in all the worst ways possible. They were a team always filling out the bottom of the LCK standings. They never enjoyed much of a fan base or a real shot at winning a Korean title. You'd be forgiven if you assumed, like many, that there was nothing of note that this club ever accomplished with their time in competitive gaming. After all, this seemed like a team where nothing good was ever going to happen to them. But today, I'm here to tell you there's something more to this that you don't know. Because while Jin Air had the outward appearance of being nothing special, behind closed doors, this organization was a completely different story. The team was a passion project, all spearheaded by one man that found himself in esports completely by accident, but went on to become one of the scene's greatest coaches, too humble for anyone to ever know his name. All of this was funded by an owner that was also an outsider to the world of competitive gaming, but came to love the scene more than any other person, becoming a guardian angel of sorts, guiding esports through some of its darkest days. Many of the players discovered and trained by this club became the greatest players in the world in their respective titles, always attributing their success to the team that started it all. But perhaps more than anything, this was an organization that reminded us, if you only look at sport through the lens of wins and losses, you'll miss out on some of the most inspirational stories hidden in plain sight.
But look at this, Teddy in the front lines trying to take down member after member. Not even looking at the game as he A-moves into Sue right now.
Let's go! Seconds. Let's go into the pad. Get the pad. He's trying it. The pentakill from Mystic.
The story of Jin Air is a story of many characters, events, and moments, but really, this story all began with one man back in the year 2000, Han Sang-yong, who was the best kickboxer in Korea. Professional fighting is in some ways an exercise in futility. To fight means spending hours of your life training with dedicated study and practice, all for the pleasure of a brief competition that still involves hits to the face. But fighting can also be addictive. Becoming a fighter is all about choosing to challenge yourself. It means experiencing a lot of frustration and pain, but also knowing that with hard work and effort, all of that struggle will make your eventual triumph feel all the more sweet. In the late 90s, fighter Han Song-yong was rising up the ladder in the world of Korean kickboxing and eventually reached rank 1 in his featherweight division. He was one of the many fighters out there who fell in love with the thrill of competition, and eventually, when his prime fighting days were over, he chose to still involve himself in the sport by moving into coaching. There, he trained other young athletes how to unlock the best version of themselves with practice and discipline, not unlike how he did years before. But apparently, it seemed as though martial arts became a bit too easy for Han, because he'd only work as a coach for about 2 years. This world had already been conquered, and Han was ambitiously seeking out a new challenge. That's how he ended up in the most unlikely of places. After conquering traditional sport, Han got the itch to move into esports. This started in the early 2000s when he began playing StarCraft and developed into a pretty damn good Brood War player. Less than a year removed from fighting, he was placing top 4 in amateur tournaments under his username HDragon and flirted with the idea of going pro. But by the mid-2000s, he was turning 25 years old, whereas most of his fellow amateurs were still young teenagers, so he figured it was probably a bit too late to play professionally. Instead, in 2005, Han decided to pursue a career as an esports coach. He didn't know it at the time, but this decision would set him off on a 15-year journey that eventually led to him building up one of the most unusual esports clubs of all time. Now, Korean esports has always had individual teams owned and operated by a variety of corporations. A company will usually sponsor a team as a marketing expense, branding them with their name and logo in exchange for providing a team house, player salaries, and coaching staff. Han got his first ever coaching job in 2005 when he was hired by the StarCraft club Hwasong Oz, who was a kind of poor company team. They never had much money to throw at their esports division, meaning their living quarters were never too nice, they couldn't splash big money on free agents, and they could only ever afford to bring in 2 staff members, 1 manager, and 1 player coach. This made it a pretty difficult place for Han to find success, although he did have one trick up his sleeve. The past 5 years of Han's life had all been spent around the world of competition. From kickboxing to gym training to amateur StarCraft tournaments, Han had spent so much time specifically around amateur players developing their skills, he had learned a thing or two about how to recognize talent. That's to say, Han might be able to find success with Oz if he can scout some great rookies to bring onto the team. Unproven rookies are always cheaper than veteran free agents, so if Han can use his talent recognition abilities to identify future stars that he signs and develops, he might be able to build this club into something special. To see how well he did, look no further than the very first player Han ever signed to Oz. The same year HDragon joined the team, Oz held a tryout for a young teenage Zerg player, someone you may have heard of before, who went by the username Jaedong. Back in 2005, Jaedong was still just a kid, a random 15-year-old so helplessly addicted to StarCraft he had flunked out of every high school his parents tried to stick him in. He was living with his family, spending all day doing nothing but grinding Brood War matches with quick breaks for meals. It was a worrying childhood with a bleak future, at least if it wasn't for HDragon, who signed Jaedong after he impressed him with his tryout. Now, back in Korean Brood War, the most impressive accomplishment every pro aimed to achieve was winning a Star League tournament. Star Leagues were broadcast on 2 separate TV stations, referred to as OSLs and MSLs respectively. They were where you saw the highest level of play. Only the best of the best could ever win even one of these tournaments. Jaedong entered his first ever OSL in 2007 and got first place. He then won 4 more. Plus a litany of other premier events, and before long, he was ranked as the best Zerg player in the world for the next 43 months. It turned out, Han was a pretty good scout and coach after all. Jaedong ended up becoming so successful under Han's coaching, in fact, that it started to bring up a question: did such a talented player belong on such a small company team? Oz were almost looked down on as a club by many of the other teams out there. The 2008 StarCraft Pro League highlighted this pretty well. After Oz crushed the month-long competition, making it all the way to grand finals with a crazy impressive run, they were matched up against SK Telecom T1, one of the richest and most successful esports clubs in Korea. In spite of Oz's great performances so far, SKT were still seen as favorites going into finals, which their coach, lovable, alluded to in a pre-game interview. When asked about the resource discrepancy between the clubs, he answered pretty frankly, Hwasong Oz only have one coach, they can't beat us. This was the kind of attitude the scene had towards Oz. As great as Jaedong was, their club wasn't necessarily anything special. Except Oz was special in one way, they had that one coach who responded aptly when asked about this comment. Oz went on to lose grand finals, but that kind of spirit was what gave their team life, and many soon came to recognize the man behind it all, which might have been what kept Jaedong around. After 2009, when the year ended with Jaedong earning his second KeSPA Player of the Year award, his contract was up for renewal. He was only 19 at the time, meaning per KeSPA rules, his parents had to negotiate a deal on his behalf. Oz offered Jaedong a salary worth just over $100,000 USD, maybe a bit less than what a world-class player deserves. Jaedong's family were unhappy with it, as his father suggested publicly he might just retire then and there. But Jaedong convinced his parents to let him stay at Oz, saying this team was what allowed him to unlock the great talent he had. These were the people he wanted to spend the rest of his career with. Something about this club was pretty special.
인기 온라인 게임 스타크래프트의 프로게이머들이 돈을 받고 승부를 조작하는 것으로 드러나 충격을 주고 있습니다.
2 years later, a match-fixing scandal rocked South Korean esports. News broke that some players were throwing matches in collaboration with betting sites for money.
검찰 조사 결과 전현직 프로게이머들은 경기 전에 자신의 선수를 알려주거나 키보드 조작을 서툴게 해 일부러 져준 뒤 수백만 원을 받아온 것으로 드러났습니다.
This quickly turned the country against StarCraft, as public trust in online gaming became so eroded a few teams had to shut down, including Oz.
스폰서 기업들이 등을 돌리기 시작했고 결국 게임단 세계가 해체되고 말았다. 내가 속한 화승우주도 그중 하나다.
That meant Han and Jaedong were now both teamless. Their contract rights were transferred to the Korean Esports Association, who took in all the players from the disbanding teams as they tried to sort through the mess. For the time being, KeSPA formed a little temporary team, so all the best players who now had no org to compete for would still be allowed to enter upcoming tournaments. This new KeSPA-run team would be named the 8th team, since they'd be the 8th team filling out the standings for the upcoming Star League. The roster consisted of all the best players from the 3 disbanding orgs, led by a coach that was quickly becoming one of the best in the business. All of this was a temporary measure. KeSPA was just trying to find a way to let all these players still compete and have careers for themselves while they searched for a new company sponsor to take over the team, but nobody was willing to do it. It seemed as though competitive gaming was a bit radioactive from the match-fixing scandal, and esports as a whole might be entering a recession of sorts. Team 8 with all their talent was unable to entice a company to sign them. That didn't signal a positive direction for the future. KeSPA was having to finance this roster a lot longer than anyone anticipated, until an unlikely hero stepped in to take over. Jin Air is a budget airliner from South Korea that you've probably never flown before. They were founded by Korean Air in the mid-2000s as a budget airline subsidiary. While Korean Air mostly does large international traffic, Jin Air works to service cheaper flights to and from regional airports, mostly within Korea and Southeast Asia. They're a small but profitable low-cost carrier, but there are 2 strange things that make Jin Air unique. The first is that they've always had an obsession with professional StarCraft. Ever since their founding, Jin Air have always been getting involved with esports in a number of ways. In 2010, Jin Air convinced Korean Air to sponsor a Star League event, hosting grand finals in an aircraft hangar at their company's headquarters. Players were welcomed on stage through massive hydraulic doors opening up to reveal planes that finalists then stepped off of. Korean esports fans back in those days were used to sitting in plastic chairs in an empty field by comparison. This kind of spectacle was not something they ever got to see. In 2011, Korean Air became the first company in half a decade to sponsor back-to-back OSLs. In an effort to top their airplane hangar venue, this time they managed to host the finals at the Oriental Pearl Tower in China. This wasn't just another impressive location, but marked the first ever Star League finals hosted in an international venue outside of Korea's borders. Korean Air continued supporting esports over the years, doing things like hosting release parties for StarCraft 2 and painting advertisements for the game on their planes, but it was their subsidiary Jin Air that was driving all this. In the coming years, it became hard to watch a StarCraft event without seeing Jin Air logos and branding everywhere, as they funded prize pools, hosted tournaments, and did everything they could to support the scene. It was honestly kind of weird to see a regional budget airliner care so much about the RTS, but the reason they cared so much might have been even weirder. All of this passion came from one person at the company, who was a member of the Cho family. Korean Air and its transportation ownership group Hanjin were founded in 1945 at the end of World War II by a man named Cho Chong-hoon. In the following years, Korean Air exploded into a massively successful conglomerate, but ownership always remained within the Cho family. Cho Chong-hoon's children all assumed various positions of power within the business or related government agencies. His eldest son, Cho Yang-ho, then took over the company in 2003. He'd go on to have 3 children of his own, all of which began working within the company or other relevant government positions, ensuring Korean Air always remained within this dynasty. And I don't know if a single person on this family tree has avoided a life marred by scandal.
Infamously ordered an aircraft to taxi back to the gate and kicked off the chief flight attendant in a tantrum over the way a junior flight attendant served her a package of nuts.
CEO of South Korea's flag carrier, Korean Air, was voted down as director of the board. In other news, 2 sisters, executives at Korean Air, have been relieved of their duties over accusations they abused their power.
The Cho family is not particularly well liked in Korea, as they've always been making the news for plenty of scandals which they never seem to face any repercussions for. Cho Yang-ho, for example, was convicted of tax evasion in 2000, yet still went on to become the head of Korean Air and the Hanjin Group just a few years later. Any scandals he generated, though, were nothing compared to his children. An entire Korean Wikipedia page has since been made to try to catalog them all. Eldest daughter Heather Cho made international news when she instigated what came to be known as the Nut Rage incident, also referred to as Nutgate. At the time, Heather was serving as vice president of Korean Air and was taking a flight departing from JFK Airport in New York City. All first-class passengers, including Heather, were given nuts bagged in their original packaging as a snack before takeoff. Heather apparently was upset that these nuts were served to her in a bag instead of on a plate. She then questioned the cabin crew chief about the procedure and got into a heated confrontation that ended with Cho assaulting him and ordering him off the plane, requiring the flight to taxi back to the gate and delaying takeoff for 20 minutes.
Korea's transportation officials have confirmed that former VP of Korean Air Cho Yeon-ah, more known now for her nut rage, did in fact verbally abuse crew members during the incident.
Heather's younger brother Walter Cho also came to be known for his fair share of scandals. These ranged from a hit-and-run case in 2000 in which Walter apparently ran away after hitting a traffic police officer, to assault when he pushed over a 77-year-old woman during a traffic confrontation. These are just what's listed on his Korean Wikipedia page. There's always plenty of other headlines he's made, but even so, today he's serving as Korean Air's CEO. The youngest of the 3 children, Emily Cho, seemed to be the best behaved of the bunch, at least for this family. She caused some controversy with her birth when her mother flew to Hawaii so she could be born with American citizenship. She also had her own little rage incident when she threw a cup of water at another executive during a marketing meeting, which she said came about because of her passion for commercials. But apart from that, she's managed to mostly stay out of the spotlight. Any other scandals she's gotten caught up in are mostly the regular rich Cho family stuff, like controversy surrounding selling company shares or dubious administrative appointments. Of all the things these 3 children have done over the years, though, perhaps the most interesting and relevant to our story is simply Emily was obsessed with esports. All 3 of the Cho children studied at their father's alma mater, the University of Southern California. But while Emily was there in the mid-2000s, she discovered StarCraft and the game's professional scene. She started playing herself, learning how to get better, watching all the pros, deciding to play Protoss because she liked the manly nature of the race, disliking the nimbler playstyles of the other pretty boy races. After returning to Korea, Emily learned about the immense esports infrastructure spanning her home country, everything from KESPA and their organization of the scene to all the various Star League competitions. In 2010, Emily was appointed in dubious legal circumstances as an executive of Jin Air, which might have been her first opportunity to work within the family business. She later became vice president and head of marketing at Jin Air, but the instant she got involved with the company, she immediately began using her power to support competitive gaming. She was the one that started using Jin Air to sponsor all sorts of StarCraft tournaments, funding prize pools and helping to run events. She was the one that convinced Korean Air to sponsor back-to-back Star Leagues at massive venues, supporting the scene even more. And when Teammate was struggling to find a company sponsor in the midst of their match-fixing scandal, she sprung at the opportunity to form her very own esports club. In 2012, the corporate sponsorship drought would finally end as Teammate was officially signed and rebranded as the Jin Air Green Wings. Emily was overjoyed getting to work with esports directly now, but Han might have been even happier. He was brought on as the team's head coach and began working directly with Emily to start building the club up into the best thing they could possibly be. Jin Air might have had a passion for competitive gaming that was greater than any other esport club out there, but even so, they were still a relatively small company team. And that meant, although they signed most of Teammate's roster to the Jin Air Green Wings, they couldn't re-sign Jaedong. Although Jaedong had previously stated his intentions to stick with the team forever, he was now entering the tail end of his career, and probably wanted to take at least one big free agency deal before retirement. It kind of made sense, especially with his peak playing days mostly behind him, but that didn't make it any easier for H-Dragon. Han had spent his entire career hand in hand with Jaedong, the first ever great talent he scouted and developed. They accomplished loads of things together, winning plenty of awards. It can't be easy to see your protege outgrow your team leaving for a richer organization, but there wasn't much time for Han to wallow in sadness, since StarCraft wasn't Korea's biggest esport for much longer. The first year of the Jin Air Green Wings was also the year League of Legends was officially released to Korea and began taking over as the country's new national pastime. It didn't take long before all the old StarCraft clubs were setting up League of Legends divisions, but Jin Air didn't get involved with League at first, probably because Emily just loved StarCraft. She was an RTS fan first and foremost, and directed the club to begin training players to compete in StarCraft 2. That's where the majority of their focus went, as Han began scouting and developing players trying to win tournaments while dealing with the loss of Jaedong. As time went on though, StarCraft's popularity began to wane, with more and more fans caring mostly about League. The premier LoL tournament OGN Champions was starting to draw more viewers than any Star League was. So eventually, with no other choice, Jin Air signed their first two League rosters, sister teams that would go on to be named the Jin Air Stealths and the Jin Air Falcons. Now, the way OGN worked in those early years was through an extended tournament structure. Teams would play a single round robin of best of twos during a group stage, with the top performers advancing to a playoff bracket to determine a champion each season. Any teams that failed to escape groups would have to re-qualify through a relegation series if they wanted to play in OGN the next split. This was kind of brutal, and didn't bode well for Jin Air. They signed their first two League squads in late 2013, a full year and a half after Korea had its official League of Legends servers go live. All the other big company teams had already snatched up all the best players, with Jin Air only able to sign people that everyone else had already passed up on. Not only that, they were also coming in as a small company team, funded by a regional budget airliner, who did have an owner that loved competitive gaming with an irrational fervor, but who also didn't really care about League as much as they did StarCraft. With the brutal competitive system and all these disadvantages, it would be a miracle if Jin Air could keep even one of their sister teams consistently in play. I don't envy whoever's responsible for coaching this team. Rather than hire specialized League of Legends coaching staff, Jin Air just told H-Dragon to coach the League rosters, while he also remained as the head coach of the StarCraft division. I shouldn't need to tell you that's a difficult task. Han was working a full-time job as the StarCraft coach, trying to build that roster up into a success, even after losing his best player, but now he had to take on the added responsibility of not just coaching two new esports rosters, but also learning an entirely new game while doing so. To use a metaphor, Han was told to build a plane while flying it. For what it's worth, he seemed excited. In interviews, the only thing H-Dragon ever said about these new responsibilities was that they were a fun way of preventing his job from becoming too routine. Han had already made the jump from being a world-class kickboxer to a world-class StarCraft coach, so perhaps stepping into League of Legends didn't seem that intimidating. We now know in hindsight, Han's career in League of Legends might have been the greatest challenge he ever had to face, but it began with an unbelievably impressive start.
And Jay, there's a solar flare. They get Necklin routing. Captain Jack coming up as well. The tidal wave comes through, but a little bit too late. And Jin Air just all over this Avengers team. Oh no, this is not looking good for Smeb. And just gonna get dove, not even staying near the turret, and easy game. They will. Zenjin nearly blown up. Pilot gets the kill, Kuehl going down right afterwards. GPM gets that one. Rock jumps in the back lines, goes after Kale immediately. OB nearly dies in the air. Honlabong low as well. Bin and Rock is gonna chase him down. Jin Air Falcons absolutely destroying Prime Optimus in a raffle stop the likes of which we have seldom seen.
Across seasons 3 and 4, Jin Air kept both of their rosters in OGN nearly every split, and managed to beat some of the best League teams out there with super fun play. They were running oddball builds like Sword of the Occult Lucian and Ohmwrecker Nami, builds based on items you can't even buy anymore in League of Legends since they were removed for being so obscure and irrelevant nobody bothered using them. Yet Jin Air were beating the best of Korea, staying in OGN using this kind of innovation. They'd almost always either manage to escape groups or re-qualify for next split through relegation. The creative play was only half the story though. The other thing keeping this team afloat was H-Dragon's coaching. Han had picked up where he left off in StarCraft, identifying future generational talents here in this new esport, which is what kept his teams alive. Like when 2013 summer ended on a bit of a downer for the club, with the Falcons making it out of groups but the Stealths facing relegation, H-Dragon went out and scouted a young Korean marksman who went by the name Mystic, someone that immediately helped them re-qualify for next split.
As Leopard barely survives with 36 health. Here comes True Shot Barrage though. Shyvana's not moving on the mini-map. This is gonna be dangerous as Mystic picks up the snipe against Leopard.
Han had just scouted another star, who he began training into a monster of a carry. In fact, Mystic started playing so impressively for Jin Air, he would be signed away to a rich club in China after his rookie year. In the coming years, Mystic would go on to win the LPL, while also earning first-team All-Pro accolades. For Han on Jin Air, it was a little bit crummy to lose his best player, again, but he had already scouted another great ADC to replace him with, Captain Jack. Jack had already built up an impressive legacy, mostly playing for the roster of CJ Entis Blaze up until this point, where he put together a highlight-worthy career with his insane mechanics. Even so, he was going through some tough times at the end of Season 3. Blaze had just released him with some disappointing performances that left most fans believing his best days were behind him. Only H-Dragon thought otherwise, who signed Jack to the Stealths. Captain Jack got the last laugh, as that Stealths roster would go on to eliminate Blaze in the following summer groups of Season 4. Jin Air were starting to establish themselves as a team that would be sticking around League of Legends for a while, mostly because of Han. It seemed as though management at Jin Air were so impressed with how well the League teams were doing, around this time they finally hired separate StarCraft staff so H-Dragon could focus solely on coaching the League of Legends rosters. As impressive as Han's teams were though, they were still hamstrung by limited resources, leaving questions about whether or not they'd ever have a serious shot for a title. League of Legends at this point was starting to develop a scene that wasn't too dissimilar from StarCraft. The big money clubs were the ones winning championships and making deep bracket runs. The small company teams never really had a shot at trophies. Jin Air in particular were starting to develop a reputation as a club that could look dominant at times, but always rostered enough rookies that rookie mistakes had them looking amateurish others. And their fans found a beautiful way to visualize this.
I was kind of bored. I was trying to pass the time, and I just decided to draw something funny and just tweeted at Monte Cristo and Doha to see if they maybe get a laugh out of it or if I get a reaction or something.
Anytime Jin Air lost a series, you would see sad planes littered across internet forums, whereas anytime they won, you would see the opposite. Occasionally, you'd see people creating their own special planes for special occasions, and before long, an entire subreddit was made, "Our Jin Air plane," in celebration of this wacky team. Part of what made the team so fun was in their name, after all. They were a budget airliner that didn't service flights to the majority of places esports fans lived. They weren't making any kind of money by sponsoring these competitive gaming teams on the international stage. It was just a passionate couple of esports fans doing everything in their power to build this team up into a success. They didn't have a real championship-worthy season yet, but that might be coming up because of a big rule change in League of Legends that happened in Season 5. Up until 2015, Korean League of Legends had a tradition where every organization always had at least 2 teams. They were called sister squads, 2 rosters that both played for the same organization and both aimed to compete for titles in OGN champions. The idea behind sister teams was that through having 2 separate rosters, you could build multiple kinds of teams at the same time, swapping resources between each as needed. One organization might want to try to build a super team of established stars with a goal of winning a title today, for example, while also rostering a rookie squad for the future, since who knows, they might end up being pretty good too. For smaller company teams like Jin Air though, this was always a challenge. Having 2 teams under your organization meant having to worry about 2 teams getting relegated. It meant splitting your players across both rosters, and for Han it meant having to worry about coaching multiple squads at the same time. It was impressive what H-Dragon had done so far. His scouting and roster construction was so on point that in spite of their resource discrepancy and all the responsibility, both the Falcons and Stealths were performing better than their pay grade. The Stealths in particular were starting to look like a title contender potentially, as in the 2014 NLB Summer Tournament they managed to dethrone KT's Bullets, Jin Air's Falcons, and almost took down reigning world champions SK Telecom T1.
떴네요. 이건 잡혔네요. 자, 근데 플라이가 넘어가서 이거는 플라이 만화 지금 충분하죠. 레드 먹었어요. 레드 먹었어요. 자,
But each time Han put together a great roster, that just made his players targets in free agency. One of the best players on the Stealths that season was a mid laner named Fly, another great rookie H-Dragon had scouted who was drawing comparisons with some of the best mids in Korea. But after he started developing into a bona fide superstar on the Stealths, he was quickly signed away after his rookie year and went off to play in China for another rich organization. Even for a talent scout with his skills, it was almost impossible for Han to field a championship lineup while constantly having to worry about filtering new talent into both of these sister teams, but that's what made Season 5 such a great opportunity. Going into 2015, Riot Games took over OGN Champions, rebranding it as the LCK with a new look and new rules. One of those new rules was that every club was now only allowed to roster 1 team for competition each. For most of the rich organizations, this kind of sucked. Limiting them to only starting 5 players meant cutting down on their roster of prospects, but for Jin Air, this meant Han could now finally combine all of his great rookie stars onto a single roster that might just be able to compete for a title, and at the start of the spring split, Jin Air was looking like the best team in Korea.
Oh, Mad Life. Oh, did he get poked? Oh, there's the kick from Chaser, gets away. Oh, they killed Mad Life. They killed him. It's a 5v4 now. Gonna get taken down. The death timer's so long at this point, though. It doesn't matter. Curl managed to get out on the Lancer.
Oh, he did it! The caster minions take him down.
A resounding victory for Jin Air after a close game 1, and I think they have proved who the better team is right now.
The first half of Jin Air's spring split was the story of the season, as they were looking like the best coach team in Korea with one of the most interesting lineups. Top lane and support were anchored by Trace and Che respectively, 2 veteran mines who were some of the bigger stars the team had managed to hold on to over the years. They were complemented with a duo of AD carries in bot lane with Captain Jack and Pilot. Jack was still with the team but was at the tail end of his career, so Han instructed him to start trading time with a rookie that he was helping to train into the future AD carry superstar that also had a perfect username for this team. But arguably, the 2 best players on this roster were in jungle and mid lane. Jungling for the team was a kid named Chaser, a still young player Han had scouted and signed when he was just 17 years old. Han had managed to hold on to him through free agencies as his overly aggressive jungling playstyle wasn't something many other Korean orgs were willing to take a chance on. Here at the start of Season 5 though, he was showing just how effective his proactive style could be as he was embarrassing some of the best junglers in Korea.
Lurking intensifies. Oh, it's Prey gets knocked up there. Wow, look at all that damage coming in. Nice burst from Pilot. Great chaining of the CC.
Mid lane might have been an even more heartwarming story for the team though. After Fly bolted for China, Han decided to entrust possibly the most important role on the team to Jin Air's backup mid laner, a kid who went by the name Ganked by Mom. GBM was considered a washed-up Orianna one-trick who nobody else wanted when Han signed him away from CJ Entus. He had a great personality, doing things like wearing bow ties every time he played on stage because he was a huge fan of Doctor Who, but nobody thought he had a serious shot at developing into a world-class player. That's what made it so surprising to hear commentators mention that at the start of this spring split, they thought he might be the best mid in Korea.
Oh, Kuro. Uh-oh, how well can he dance? Oh, not well enough. Wow. GBM, the accuracy has been fantastic.
GBM in space have suddenly become like two of the best players in Korea.
All these players were coming together and performing way better than the sum of their parts. Through week 5, Jin Air were in second place in the LCK standings. The only team ahead of them were the GE Tigers, who they nearly beat in a narrow 2-1 series. Everyone else was an easy victory by comparison. Jin Air was even sweeping former world champions Samsung Galaxy and SK Telecom.
The banners coming in from Jin Air, laughing at Faker.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that to Faker in lane.
The last time somebody laughed at Faker.
Oh, Faker getting blown up by GBM. Trace with the sick taunts.
Han's roster construction skills were shining brighter than they had ever before. It was shocking what he was able to do with the limited resources he had, but sadly, Jin Air couldn't keep up this performance the second half of the split. As so often happens in League of Legends, halfway through the season, a patch hit the servers, changing the game in a kind of drastic way. A jungle change occurred with a new core item that was added to the game named Cinderhulk. This item ended up being a pretty good way to negate early aggression and threw a wrench into all of Jin Air's plans. Enemy junglers now had a great item that helped them to stop Chaser's proactive jungling, and with Chaser having less presence, suddenly GBM was looking weaker on his own mid lane. Before long, the constant trading between starters bot lane created more instability, and Jin Air began dropping down the standings fast. By the end of the spring split, they only barely qualified for playoffs, and in the playoff bracket a few weeks later, they were eliminated in the first round. That split reminded Jin Air about the limitations of what a coach can do. They might have a great leader who can moneyball his way into a talented roster that can go up against anybody on any given Sunday, but those rosters couldn't ever keep their performance going at their peak for a full season year-round. Even so, Han got the team back together during the mid-season break and helped them look strong again for summer. In fact, Jin Air repeated their dominant performance in the first half of summer again. Chaser in particular was looking so good he was in contention for the season's MVP award. But the same cycle from spring came around. Jin Air started dropping a few games to a couple of the bigger company teams. Their nerves then got rattled. Soon they were falling down the standings, and before long their playoff chances were in jeopardy. Going into week 11, they had a chance to get back on top of things in what should have been a free victory against the winless last place team Senbu Sonic Boom. Instead, this was the series that put Jin Air's split in the grave.
Very low. Chaser wants to get in, but he's going to get stopped, and Pilot dies. Nuclear and Soul on top of him. Trace, he's trying to get the low members, and there is GBM on your screen right now. And this is going to be the first win for Spenu Sonic Boom on the season against all odds. When there is nothing for them on the line, they will take out Jin Air and maybe, just maybe, spoil Jin Air's chance at playoffs and the World Championship.
For all the effort Han was putting into this team through scouting and coaching, it wasn't enough to pull out playoff victories. The impressive peaks were always met with disappointing valleys, and Season 5 was about to come to a close, with Jin Air possibly missing out on their best shot for a Korean title. But Jin Air were still given one more chance to prove themselves here. Because they had performed so well in both spring and summer, Jin Air qualified for the Korean Regional Final, a short bracket that determined who Korea would send to Worlds as their number 3 seed. Keep in mind, up until now, Jin Air had never actually won a single best of 5 in any LCK or OGN playoff series. They looked great in regular seasons, but always choked come playoffs. Naturally, everyone assumed there was no way in hell they could make any noise during regionals, but they weren't throwing this opportunity away.
Oh, and he's going to get the slicing maelstrom up right before he dies. Holy cow. And goodbye, Goong. He's going to get tagged at the end of that one. Wow, Che barely living. Want this fight. GBM now back up. You're going to knock him out. Are they going to take this? And he steals it with the barrels. 1,100 damage on that barrel. Puts it out of smite range. And there we go on the tank. Tank just gets destroyed with the combo. And now everybody just fighting in a wealth of AoE. This is a shocking 3-0 from the Jin Air Green Wings to advance to the next round of the finals. That is it.
Madlife walks right to the bush. They go. They flash. The pulverize misses. Madlife flashes in response. Ambition gets very low. So does Che, though. First blood goes over to Coco. Uh-oh, Shy and Ambition really low, though. A kill for GBM. Still pressuring that inhibitor. Shy coming back. He's got full life. Jin Air needs to run. Shy not that tanky, though. And Jin Air another kill. This time Nexus goes down in a 2-0 lead. They are one game away from KT Rolster tomorrow, and a good shot at going to Worlds. This chase Jin Air away. Shy all over the back lines, and we know what he can do on that Maokai when he gets back there. Kill for space, getting excited. Now Coco comes in for a double, and there goes the ace. Stayed a little bit too close. It's really poked up. Oh, again, Madlife pushing Che under now. Che forced the flash, gets killed by the turret. Madlife. Oh, sure will. There's the Baron. There's the surrender. Jin Air knows what's up. And we are going to blind pick, guys. Oh, here we go again. Big engage onto space. Great catch. And CJ Ambition in space. Caught yet again. How many times have we seen it this season? And it really can. A little bit zoned. Exhaust onto GBM. GBM's coming in, man. There's a powder keg. A lot of damage. Sheno onto Coco. Whoa, that was a lot of damage from that powder keg. And GBM all over everybody. Double kill. 3-0 against Najin. It's going to be 3-2 against CJ Antis. Jin Air is going to the final stage of the gauntlet. GG.
Jin Air were now in grand finals against KT Rolster. If they could just pull out a victory in this one best of 5, they'd be going to Worlds.
Seems suspicious. Can they get him with a cocoon first? So there we go. There's the ultimate from Malphite. There's a cocoon. Great trap onto Someday. Tries to lunge away. He flashes. Are the minions enough? Chaser tries to repel over to him. Someday, look at those plays. He finally goes down. The Q from Trace finishes him off. Chaser barely escaped. This may get the dragon for Jin Air. Pickaboo stopped up, though, around the Emperor's Divide Wall. Has to pop his ultimate. Still going to go down. Another kill for Pilot. KT on the run. Jin Air can just turn this right into a Baron, right into a Dragon, whatever they want, really. Well, Score flashes, gets slowed anyway. Chaser on the run, arrows right there. Score going to get taken down, and there's a kill for Gank by Mob. Rommel used, they're going to hit Score. Pickaboo comes back in onto Che, gets locked up at the moment. There's a big unstoppable force knockup, but where's the follow-up from Jin Air? They need to be careful here. They look unsure of themselves as they try to start fighting back. Damage being done. They're just delaying. Pilot goes down. A kill for Arrow, but 2 coming in for Jin Air. Never mind, the inhibitor goes down to bot lane again. Emperor's Divide pushes Trace back in. Trace tries to get away, can't make it. A big triple kill comes in for Arrow. GBM in trouble. That is a quadra kill. KT coming in, Score flashes in, he takes it, he steals the Baron, big knockup from Che, but KT still okay. Nagne coming from the side, and KT looking good after that Baron steal. This could be it. Jin Air on the run, but they're running to the wrong side of the map. Che, and that is gonna be in a double kill for Nagne, making a triple, and KT Rolster, after they finish up Chaser, a quadra, they are going to Worlds.
That's right, congratulations to KT Rolster avenging themselves after the finals.
10-1-7 for Nagne.
2015 reminded the world that no matter what, small company teams never had a shot to win. For what it's worth, this wasn't a problem localized to Jin Air or even Korea. In fact, we saw almost the exact same story play out over in North America that very same year. In the 2015 Spring Promotion Series, a team named Gravity Gaming won their way into the LCS. Just like Jin Air, Gravity were a small company team started by the child of a rich business mogul who had a genius head coach, a creative roster with some rookie phenoms that overthrew better funded opponents in the regular season repeatedly, and just like Jin Air, they lost. They lost in spring, they lost in summer, and they lost in the regional finals. After Gravity's impressive year, the team ended with the owner selling the LCS spot. As the years passed by, we'd go on to see this story play out again and again. From Echo Fox to H2K to Unicorns of Love, so many small and exciting teams came into the world of League of Legends. They had thrilling highs with fun regular season triumphs, but every one of them left the scene of their own accord or otherwise, with none of them getting to win a championship. Part of the problem with all of this might have just been the business model of esports. Most teams across every region were failing to turn a profit. They were seen as investments by the owners, and whichever organization had an owner with deep pockets willing to burn cash for titles to make their investment look better, they'd be the one holding trophies at the end of the year. If you were lucky enough as a small company team to win promotion into a league, you were kind of better off by selling your spot for some cash rather than sticking around until you eventually got relegated. Small moments of triumph never built you a large enough fan base to start turning a profit, and you certainly never had the opportunity to seriously contend for a title if you cared about the prestige. If you were lucky enough to have a window where your team and LCS spot seemed exciting, that was the perfect time to exit. Esports just weren't a sustainable business to stick around in, which resulted in even some of the big company teams exiting. Back in Korea, one of the largest and oldest esports clubs was the one owned by Korea's richest company, Samsung. They had sponsored a team back during the Pro StarCraft era and found some success there, but when they entered League of Legends in 2013, they became a force to be reckoned with. Just 1 year later, one of their two sister teams managed to win a world championship in Season 4, and even though they lost that whole roster to free agency in the following offseason, they built up the squad again, winning another world title in Season 7. Even still today, Samsung are only one of 2 teams in League of Legends history to win multiple world championships, and as if to celebrate their accomplishment, they left. Right after winning their second world title, South Korea's largest and most profitable company exited the world of competitive gaming. They hit their peak and were happy to sell, getting out the instant that they could. Honestly, you can't really blame them. A lot of people had that attitude about esports, and even still today, most teams are not profitable, most leagues are struggling to find financial viability. It just kind of made sense for people to exit the scene while they could. But that is what made it so strange Jin Air chose to stay. See, the reason Gravity Gaming and Samsung and all the other teams' stories from League of Legends history were different was that Jin Air wasn't ever leaving. They weren't here for the money, they weren't here for the titles, Emily didn't start this team to turn a quick buck, and H-Dragon wasn't using his scouting talents here because he wasn't getting offers elsewhere. Everyone at this club from top to bottom just loved this team and the world of competitive gaming. They loved it irrationally, and they weren't going to leave until somebody kicked them out. Even that might not be enough to stop them. During the mid-2010s, League of Legends had started to grow to become such a dominant force in Korean esports that the old world of StarCraft was finally shutting down. StarCraft Pro Leagues that had run ever since 2005 were hosting their last event in 2016, where after that they would close their doors for good. Naturally, every KESPA team that competed in Pro League shut their StarCraft divisions down as well. After all, why would anyone bother playing a dead game? Well, every Star League team shut down except for one.
많은 스타2 팀들이 없어지고 진에어만 남아 있는데요. 가장 먼저 그런 이야기가 나오고 그런 상황이 됐을 때 아니요. 선수들은 그럼 어떡하냐면서 다른 것보다 선수들을 가장 걱정해 주셨던 저희 진에어 조현민 부사장님께 정말 감사드리고요.
Going into Season 6, Jin Air lost all their best players to free agency again. GBM left to go play for big bucks in North America, while Chaser moved off to a newly forming Korean super team, but Jin Air were used to this by now. Every year, H-Dragon would scout great rookies, that squad would perform above expectations, and then everyone would leave in free agency, but they were fine with it. After losing all his stars again, Han filled the holes in the roster with more overlooked rookies that were about to have long, successful careers. That led to Jin Air performing above their payroll again, and they finished top 4 in 2016 spring, only one series loss away from playoffs in summer.
Okay, Mickey. Oh man, Mickey just walks up, face checks it, does throw down a good exhaust, but even the collateral damage isn't enough to kill him. The two-shot barrage just sniped from Pilot.
It was amazing how many great players kept flowing into this organization. At this point, other teams even began taking notice and started using Jin Air as a talent farm system. When Han scouted and signed a new batch of rookies, that gave every other team the signal to target them in free agency the next offseason. Han would spend the year developing them and refining their potential, so right when their rookie contract was up, all the other big clubs could swoop in with massive amounts of cash to sign all but guaranteed stars. Han didn't even care at this point. In fact, he started to spin this situation into a recruiting pitch for incoming rookies. Come to Jin Air. You might not win an LCK title here, but you'll get paid millions to win championships with whatever team snatches you up next. It was a rough arrangement, but in H-Dragon's own words, "If we can't be together, I'll try my best to help my players move to a better team." This attitude continued to garner him respect amongst all the players in the league and was one of the things that kept rookie players willing to sign with his teams.
저는 되게 가벼운 마인드로 게임에 입단을 했었거든요, 어릴 때.
네네네.
되게 그냥 저는 그냥 게임이 좋아서 왔다라고 했는데 그때 한상현 감독님이 엄청 혼을 냈었어요. 처음 그때 입단 테스트를 보러 간 거였거든요.
네.
근데 감독님이 막 혼내는 거예요. 너 그런 마인드로 프로 안 된다. 그러면 사실 그때 당시에 제가 아마추어 중에서는 그래도 좀 핫한 매물이었거든요. 그래가지고 그때 당시에 되게 당황했었는데
네.
되돌아 봤을 때 그런 되게 알려주시는 마인드나 그때 당시에 케어해 주셨던 코치 감독님이 있었기에 참 지금의 제가 있다고 생각해요.
After the great Season 6 performance, 2017 saw more poachings, with Han now having to worry about finding a new bot lane. Longtime support Che left to go join a European roster, as did their AD carry Pilot, who left to join Paris Saint-Germain of all teams. Losing the team's AD carry in particular was a pretty big blow. With such an important role vacant, all of Jin Air's future successes or failures might just rest on who Han signs to replace him. Luckily, H-Dragon scouted another star that was pretty damn good.
Good. Charge is coming through. We'll see the body block coming in straight into the impale there onto Upti as he goes low, but now the hero's entrance comes down, gets a pop-up onto Song 1. He's going to be the first one that falls as Teddy finds another kill. Upti charging up, double kill, going over to Teddy. Can he find it? The triple, the quadra! Is it going to be the pentakill? One more to finish it off. They're going to hand it over to him. The Feather Storm comes through. Pentakill goes over to Teddy. We asked for it. He delivers on it. Jin Air Green Wings close out game number 2.
Teddy was an AD carry scouted by Han when he was only 18 years old. He was a shy kid, a bit intimidated by H-Dragon, but he got over his fears and signed with Jin Air anyway.
진 에어 갔을 때 한상현 감독님이 계셨는데 솔직히 무서웠는데 한 감독이 좀 많이 한상현 감독이 좀 무서웠는데
He had a unique attitude for a league pro. For example, his username Teddy came from a personal love of stuffed animals as well as a habit of sleeping with a teddy bear every night. When asked in interviews about what kind of legacy he wanted to leave for himself, he would just say things like he wants to be remembered as a good and funny gamer. But for all his quirks, Teddy was also a shockingly talented AD carry.
Finds the hit on the crown and takes him down. TP coming in, so on, looking for a flank, and Teddy gets the 2-for-1 special. Triple kill in the end going over to him, and Jin Air might have just swung this into their favor.
Immediately after Han got him on Jin Air, Teddy began performing as one of the best players on the team and the new sole carry. Other teams gave him the nickname Walking Nexus, since whether or not you could beat Jin Air was all about whether or not you could kill Teddy. His first year with the team saw some growing pains as Jin Air won a number of games but still fell down the standings, so they had to re-qualify for the following summer. But Han made sure they did and soon found a brilliant way to use Teddy's skill set for the team. The idea was to start stalling. Part of what made it so impossibly difficult for underdogs to ever consistently win was the in-game action. A match of League normally lasts anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes with loads of team fights and engagements happening all the time. Some underdogs like Jin Air always had the talent to beat all their opponents in a single game or early series phase. The difference was that Jin Air couldn't play perfectly every fight. Over the years, they had lost plenty of series in heartbreaking fashion, where after a great early game performance, they slipped up later on at the worst possible time. This is kind of what happened on a broader scale every season they played. But Han found a creative solution to this problem, which was to slow down every match to a crawl. As the years went on, Jin Air soon became known as the team that would play in some of the longest matches in League of Legends history. Han figured if early game aggression wasn't something they could capitalize on, and most games came down to one big late game teamfight anyway, you might as well play around that. Dance around the ring as long as possible to tire your opponent out before letting loose with one knockout punch.
The Jin Air Green Wings coast to a victory after those picks. Wow. Really surprising that Jin Air was able to last long enough in that game, given how much damage Coco was doing, but eventually they pull it out. They have the superior scaling.
Over the course of Season 7, Jin Air started to become one of the toughest LCK teams to beat. Not because they were more talented than anyone or because they had better strategies, but because nobody worked harder than they did to pull out a win. They might be falling down the standings, but they were always winning enough to stave off relegation, and they frequently beat some of the best teams in the world in the process. SK Telecom, for example, who are an esports club so prolific I've already had to mention them a couple of times in this documentary, they were the kings of Korean League of Legends, and arguably still are today. By the end of Season 7, they had won 3 World Championships and rostered the greatest player of all time. The great rivals that beat them the most over the years were normally other top clubs. World champion caliber teams with Korean titles, or historic rivals going all the way back to StarCraft. Yet of all the teams SK Telecom has faced, they've lost to Jin Air just as much as anyone else.
Starting the 4v5 though is Jin Air. They get the huge stun out of Snowflower once again. He will give his life for that play, but that will be the life for the game. And it looks like Jin Air, with all these members going down and the clean ace, is going to pick up game number 2. Look at how happy they are in the booth now. They were all business after game 1, but here they are showing their true emotions.
I frankly have no idea why, but the Jin Air Green Wings were one of SKT's greatest weaknesses. The first ever LCK series they played was a 2-0 sweep for Jin Air, and in not particularly close fashion. Once Jin Air picked up Teddy and the team began moving into their drag out the game until we can win strategy, SK had even worse results against them. Jin Air might have not gotten the respect from international audiences for these victories or their incredibly tenacious style of play, but for the teams who actually had to play against them, they saw how hard they worked and the genius who was responsible for it all. During the 2017 All-Star Series, Han was voted by LCK players to be the coach of their All-Star team. To most of the outside observers out there, this might have seemed like an odd choice, but everyone in Korea could tell just how hard he was working. It certainly wasn't easy. By this point in his life, Han had well entered adulthood. He was a husband who settled down marrying a former KESPA referee. He even had a kid with his wife in 2018 and was starting to enjoy fatherhood. Since his wife had worked in the world of professional StarCraft, she perhaps knew better than anyone just how much effort someone has to put into this kind of job. But seeing all the late nights Han was working during all of those years to try and keep this team competitive, even she couldn't help but ask him at one point, "Are you okay with all the work you're putting into this?" Things just got harder and harder for the team as time went on. By the end of 2017, Teddy wanted to leave the team in free agency, as he was the latest star being offered loads of high-paying contracts elsewhere. But H-Dragon convinced him to stay for Season 8, just asking for a little bit more time to help find and train a replacement. Teddy agreed, and his reward for this sacrifice would be an all-time great record.
Flag and drag, tries to get the pop-up, so there's no follow-up. Nexus now exposed Jin Air. I think they've finally done it. 94.5 minutes on the clock. They take it home, and Jin Air Green Wings take down SKT 2-1 in this best-of-3 series. 12:09 at the end of the night. Breaking world records all around. Jin Air, enjoy that win. Revel and bask in the glory, because you deserve it.
In the longest game in League of Legends history, Teddy got the most CS in League of Legends history while beating the best team in League of Legends history. Jin Air were putting in so much effort. Even so, the team was still slipping down the standings. They were just narrowly avoiding relegation series by the end of 2018. If there was ever a time for an exit strategy, it was now. During the 2018-19 offseason would have been the perfect time for the team to close up shop, as esports valuations were sky high. Teddy had just left to go join SK Telecom, and on top of that, H-Dragon was offered a substantial contract to make even more money coaching another organization, but he rejected it because he was worried Jin Air would get relegated without him. He didn't want to see this team go down alone. If you came to esports recently, this is probably what you think of when you remember Jin Air. The losing streaks, the poor performances, all the games of them getting blown out. You think of their 2019 spring split where they went 1-17, almost losing every single series they played. The team's spirits were at an all-time low during that run, but even still, Han was trying to figure out ways to keep smiles on his players' faces. At one point, when things were starting to go off the rails, he got everyone on the team buzz cuts as a spontaneous bit of fun, pulling a bit of a prank on the LCK hair and makeup department, but nothing could stop the inevitable.
But we're trying to fight here. Yep, Griffin's diving in. Chovy gets there maybe a little bit too early, but has the stopwatch. Viper dives forward as well, but finally we found the damage. In goes the leap. The Azir is dead. Somehow Griffin are just utilizing their wallets so beautifully to murder this Jin Air roster.
In 2019 summer, Jin Air lost every single series they played. 0-18, a perfect split. They only managed to win 4 games across those series, one against SKT and one against future world champions Damwon Gaming, funnily enough. The team was still trying really hard, even to the bitter end. Of course, a last place finish meant they had to go through another relegation series. Jin Air would have to beat some of the best amateur teams from that split if they wanted to re-qualify for LCK, something they had done many times before. Relegation started off okay at first, as Jin Air got a series win over Team Dynamics, but then they were stunned when they lost a series against APK Prince, an amateur team led by a couple of former Jin Air players. This sent them down to a loser's bracket where they had one last shot at qualification. Their opponents were the other relegated LCK team, Hanwha Life. Hanwha are not a small company team.
And Jin Air, the plane ride is about to end. They're trying to stop it, but this Nexus turret is already so extraordinarily low. Final hour has been popped, but it might be better used to describe Root's experience in the LCK.
And Jin Air Green Wings' experience in the LCK.
Yeah. I mean, Jin Air have been here for a while, but Root only had that final hour, really.
Maybe Jin Air didn't mean anything to you, but they meant something to the LCK. In the post-game interview with Hanwha, a moment that should have celebrated their requalification, you can see that their coach is in tears. Not because he's happy at their success, he's distraught they had to eliminate Jin Air.
I cannot say I'm really happy that we won. It's really sad because we've been together for a long time, and Jin Air always was doing their best, and all the players were doing their best, but it's really sad or sorry that we met in such a hard situation. So I just want to say that they did a great job to the Coach Han and also all the Jin Air players.
After relegation, Jin Air still didn't quit. H-Dragon shouldered the blame for the loss, stepping down from the team he had worked with since 2005, but the organization kept going. They played in the Korean Challenger circuit, where they eventually finished first place, something that should have given qualification opportunities to the LCK for next split, but the LCK was moving on without them. 2020 was the year franchising replaced promotion and relegation in Korea. From now on, 10 static teams would remain competing in LCK permanently. These 10 teams were chosen through an application process, accepting whoever was most financially stable, committed, and prepared with plans for future profitability, and Jin Air applied. Even with their small company status, with their disappointing results, with their heartbreaking history and limited budget, they still wanted to be a part of esports. They were selected as an alternate, meaning they would have been given the opportunity to join the LCK if one of the first 10 teams accepted backed out, but none of them did. All 10 LCK teams were chosen. Jin Air's time in esports was about to come to an end. They had one final Challenger series to play, but these would be their last League of Legends matches ever. You know, back when H-Dragon was coaching StarCraft in the early 2010s, there was an interesting moment he had with one of his rookies. The player in question was someone named Rogue, a recently signed trainee that Han had brought in that he believed had lots of promise. After joining the team, however, Rogue was miserable. He signed on wanting to chase the dream of becoming a pro gamer one day, but he was not adapting well to the lifestyle at all. From living in the team house, to the endless hours of practice, to not getting to spend time with family or friends, it was all starting to grate on him and make him depressed. So about half a year after joining, Rogue went to H-Dragon and told him that he was going to retire. But Han didn't let him. He talked with him, and told him what a great star he thought he could be. The life of an esports competitor is hard. Yeah, it takes a lot of work to become great. You have to spend years working tirelessly to hone your skills and face so much disappointment along the way. But if you have the drive and the passion and talent, you just have to make it through. Just get through all of those hard times and you'll find success waiting for you at the end of your long journey. And Han talked Rogue out of it. He kept on competing, adjusted to the new life, and he started winning. Before long, Rogue was racking up Star League victories and Premier Tournament wins. He was looking like the Jaedong of StarCraft 2, demolishing everybody with Zerg, and today, most people consider Rogue to be one of the greatest StarCraft 2 players of all time. All that hard work paid off.
You ever feel like nothing good was ever gonna happen to you?
Yeah, and nothing did. So what?
If you're a fan of League Esports, you probably remember the Jin Air Green Wings and their unique ability to make history in all the worst ways possible. They were a team always filling out the bottom of the LCK standings. They never enjoyed a large fan base or a real shot at winning a Korean title. You'd be forgiven if you assumed, like many, there was nothing of note that they ever accomplished with their time in competitive gaming. After all, this seemed like a club where nothing good was ever going to happen to them. But this team was something special. They were filled with so many great players and coaches who worked tirelessly to contribute to esports, even when nobody gave them recognition for it. They were run by an owner that had a love for the scene way more genuine than any other owner out there. They weren't here to turn a profit or to try and chase money and fame. They chose to sacrifice all personal ambition just to help their friends succeed. Nobody ever gave them the appreciation they deserved for all their hard work, but I hope it speaks to their character that no matter what the future holds, they won't ever be forgotten. Hey, thank you so much for watching this documentary. I appreciate you making it all the way to the very end. Before you go, I have a couple of exciting announcements. Firstly, I have a second channel, GBay100, linked in the description, where I'm going to be doing a sort of behind-the-scenes video of the production of this documentary. This was like a 6-month project that has taken a long time to make and has gone through many iterations, so I'd love to share some of the details of that with you. I also have a Twitch page where I stream, and I'm going to be doing a director's commentary live stream over there if anyone is interested in seeing that. That'll happen about a week from now. If you miss it, you can see the VOD by subscribing to my Patreon, but even if you don't do anything like that, I really appreciate you guys watching these videos, and I hope you keep on enjoying them. I'll see you in the next one.